Bergabung bersama kami secara eksklusif di CNBC Indonesia, Monsieur Pascal Lamy, Chair of the Climate Overshoot Commission, also a former Director General of World Trade Organization. Enchanté, Monsieur Lamy.
My pleasure.
First of all, welcome to Indonesia. Bienvenue à Jakarta.
I'm very pleased to be back here.
Yeah. Thank you so much for joining us here and carving out some times of your busy schedule. So first of all, tell me about your visit here in Jakarta, Indonesia. What sort of agendas you have while you are here?
Well, we wanted this Climate Overshoot Commission, which is an independent body, which I have the privilege to chair, the mandate of which is to look at what if we overshoot the 1.5 degree of global warming. What does this mean for countries on this planet? What should we do? Which for the moment we do not do. And we thought that having a meeting of this commission here in Jakarta, in Indonesia, which is a very large country, which is a perfect example of both the opportunities and the challenge of climate change, and we will do the same in Africa, and we already did it in Cairo during the Sharm el-Sheikh COP. We want our deliberations, our recommendations to be tested with countries, NGOs, governments that have to input what we do, and that's what we are doing here in Jakarta. We are discussing among ourselves with a group of scientists and with experts, but we also want people who are confronted with climate change and who are trying hard to address the negative consequences of climate change. We want to discuss with them.
In terms of climate change, Monsieur, some people and some institutions say that developed countries currently prioritizing more on energy security over energy sustainability, and this is what has made a lot of numbers of developed countries in Europe are going back again to use fossil fuels energy because of the energy protectionism due to the Russia and Ukraine war. What is your opinion towards this?
I think the situation has changed. I mean, last year, let's say summer last year, given the terrible consequences of the Russian invasion of Ukraine on energy markets, there was a discussion in Europe whether the track to zero carbon, which necessitates a lot of new energies, renewables, and less fossils, would be diverted. Thus, prioritizing energy security on energy sustainability, as you said. I think the situation now is different.
The situation now is different.
I think the situation is different, because EU has reasonably coped with the energy security issue. We have not had in the EU any energy shortage this winter, and that was the peak season for energy consumption. And second, on the contrary, this has led European countries and the European Union to accelerate its transition to renewables rather than slow it. So in a way, this invasion, which is very bad news, has already led to some non-negative consequences. The Europeans have not diverted from their track to the energy transition, and they've rather decided to accelerate
the transition even more.
That's my view.
Moshe, still on the invasions of and the tension between Russia and Ukraine war, do you think the situation can actually be a momentum of setback the global emission targets?
I think short term, probably.
Yes.
Because we've had to leave Russian fossil fuels, such as oil and gas, which have been replaced by oil and gas coming from elsewhere, Middle East and US, short term. Long term, I think again, the necessity for an EU to sever itself from Russian dependence is an acceleration.
Accelerate. So you think more of it on the long term is a lesson learned. This tension is a lesson.
Absolutely. Short term, for instance, some coal power plants have been reactivated in countries like Germany, but I think this is a very short-term development. Long-term, EU will get more quickly to what it needs to get in terms of zero. As you know, the EU target for net zero is 2050, and we have a minus 55% target for 2030.
Now moving on, Monsieur. Developing countries, especially like Indonesia, need a lot of amount of loans and large funds from developed countries to be able to reduce emission in large quantities, while also we have to manage a lot of robust economic growth and economies properly. How do you see the commitment, and how strong actually is the commitment of developed countries to support and to catalyze the target emission for developing countries like Indonesia, such as?
Well, I think in general, developed countries do not do enough to help emerging countries coping with the financial problem they have to address climate change. I mean, overall, there is not enough finance, and some of what has been promised has not been delivered. So, and this needs to change, and the Global Overshoot Commission, I mean, we're not yet at the stage where we agree on recommendations, but I would be surprised if we would not, at the end of the day, propose a very massive scaling up of climate finance. Used to be development finance. Yeah. It's probably now something like climate and development finance. And there has to be more of that. Now, on the other side, assuming more money would be available, then we also need in developing countries the necessary quality of projects.
Necessary quality of.
There is a necessity for developing countries to beef up their capacity to table bankable projects. It's one thing to say, I want to do this in general.
Yeah.
It's another thing to come with a blueprint of how much, when, which technology, which timelines, which KPIs, and there is also something to be done on the side of developing countries to present projects that are bankable.
In terms of institutions like Climate Overshoot Commission, what are the things that Climate Overshoot Commission can do to catalyze the development of climate transition energy for developing countries like Indonesia, and also to support developed countries to seek more of the project investment for climate transition?
I mean, I think we have to look at the whole range of what we need to do. Mitigation, adaptation, carbon removal, and even looking at geoengineering, which is a much more contentious topic. We have to look at the whole range of options and then mobilize finance on the priorities.
And even more, Indonesia, Monsieur, has the ambition to reduce emission production, even reaching the net zero emission in 2050, our target. However, there are still a lot of obstacles about this. Tons of workers of Indonesia are relying heavily on this industry. In your point of view, how can Indonesia achieve this target well?
I think Indonesia has comparative advantages. It has a huge forest capacity, and the forest is a big carbon sink. It has a lot of wetland or mangroves, which are big sinks of carbon, and we should make sure it's not released. And there are in wind energy, for instance, there is a big potential. So I mean, my sense is that Indonesia has the potential to do it, has the capacity to do it. There needs to be finance for that. There was an agreement at the G20 based on what was not really done in Glasgow with this 20 million Just Transition Fund.
Just transition.
Getting this money affected to real projects, I think, is the next step to do. So I have no doubt the potential is there. It's a question of matching bankable projects to available finance.
Matching and getting it into
I think there is a bit of that ongoing.
Matching and getting it into real projects.
Absolutely.
That will make a difference. Probably to add up to our discussion, because you mentioned previously about ore, one of our commodity in Indonesia. We know that there is a trade dispute between European Union and Indonesia because Indonesia has banned raw export materials of raw ore. And European Union has filed a lawsuit to WTO, which eventually Indonesia is lost. What is your view towards this?
I mean, there are two contentious issues between Indonesia and the European Union, palm oil and deforestation. And Indonesia does not like what the EU did in reducing palm oil coming from what they say is deforestation, and the EU does not like what Indonesia did in limiting its export subsidies. Both cases are now before the WTO, and they will be adjudicated. As a former DG of WTO, it would be risky for me to say where the litigation will be on both cases. I can see arguments for and against, and lawyers are very good at doing that. The good news is that we have a place where such a dispute can be adjudicated.
WTO has this special place such disputes can adjudicate it.
Absolutely. And whereas the US have sort of stepped out of the dispute settlement of WTO, the good news is that countries like Indonesia or the European Union are still implementing the disciplines and the adjudication process. And I think this is the way to go.
Okay. But still on the Indonesia ban policy on ore, Moshe, do you think this ban policy of ore is against the international trade cooperation and some sort of things?
It depends. It depends whether this is seen as an environment protection measure. In other words, is over-exploitation of some mines leading to negative environmental consequences, in which case there is a ground to do that, or whether it's to reserve the production to domestic producers, in which case it's much more like protectionism, where you protect your domestic producer from foreign competition, and not what I call precautionism, which is exercising the necessary environmental precaution.
And moving on to climate crisis again, what could emerging markets, emerging countries like Indonesia do to achieve its net target emission by 2060 amid so many challenges? And can this climate action policy actually can go hand in hand with a robust economic growth? What do you think about that?
I think so. I'm not among those who believe that addressing climate necessitates to reduce growth, which is something which is socially impossible for many developed countries. I think we have to find a combination of finance, technology, changing in production or consumption habits, and a lot of that has to do with the North, because still today the main consumption pump on the world economy is in the northern part. I mean, northern consumers of energy, of goods, of food have to change their habits in order to make this system more environment friendly. But I think in the case of Indonesia, it's mostly a problem of governance. It's a problem of coordination. It's a problem of proper sequencing and division of responsibilities. There is, for instance, a very large dimension about the hydrosphere, the ocean, sea, rivers, lakes, the contribution to climate change being essential. Indonesia, I think, remains a case in point.
And even more with a rich commodity, yes, you see Indonesia's problem is more on the governments.
Yeah, I think at the end of the day, a proper sequencing, a proper roadmap, proper timelines is what matters, so that public opinion can put the necessary pressure on governments.
For a betterment of Mother Earth and also future generations. Thank you so much, Mojo, for sharing us your perspective with CNBC Indonesia. A pleasure to have you here.
Thanks a lot.
And have a great day.
Thanks.